So we shall have our sitting. Good afternoon. Happy to have you here. When we ended the other day, we suspended, and we're going to resume. But I would like to remind the members of committee, as I did the other day, that we have our study. I think we might need 3 sittings to deal with this major study. We have 6 motions that were adopted, and we have more than 25 motions. So we're going to have to contemplate a work plan. And I don't know who's listening, but we decided not to have our witness who's going to be here today. But we hope that we'll be able to hear from these witnesses on transition to civil life. Mr. Richards.
When the meeting was suspended, we were in the middle of debate on the motion.
Exactly.
Should we not be returning to that debate?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Okay. Exactly. Like I said on Monday, the meeting was suspended, so now we are back to discuss this motion that we have. On se rappelle que la motion a été amendée.
You will remember that the motion was amended, so the discussion continues at the request of members of committee on this motion. So I'm ready to hear from committee members who would like to discuss this motion.
Oh, Mr. Casey, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and welcome back, everyone. Over the suspension, we've had time to have a look at this, to hear some of the conversations that were taking place with the veterans in the back of the room, and in part as a result of those discussions, I wish to propose an amendment. And the amendment is as follows: to invite the National Capital Commission in regards to their role in the construction of the National Monument to Canada's mission in Afghanistan, to assure the committee that the project will respect established guidelines and that Afghanistan war veterans who wish to see the monument built quickly will not experience additional delays. That's the amendment that I propose. That amendment would immediately follow the last one, which was adopted by the committee to invite Aaron O'Toole, which amendment was, of course, passed by the committee. So it would immediately follow that. And if the chair finds the amendment to be in order, I'm prepared to speak to it.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I have Ms. Hefner. Excuse me. Oh. C'est correct? Ouais. OK, donc on va distribuer, on regarde cet amendement et puis on va distribuer à tous les membres de façon à ce qu'ils puissent.
So we'll look at the. Okay. The amendment that was tabled is only in English, but you have your earpieces, and we will debate. On my list, I have Ms. Hefner.
The floor.
Okay, Mr. Casey still has the floor to explain why he tabled this amendment. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The National Monument to Canada's mission in Afghanistan will recognize the commitment and sacrifice of Canadians who served in Afghanistan and the support provided to them at home. The monument will be built in Ottawa, located on the east side of Booth Street, north of the National Holocaust Monument and across the street from the Canadian War Museum. The National Capital Commission's role in the National Monument to Canada's mission in Afghanistan is similar to that of the design and construction of other monuments. The National Capital Commission participates in the site selection, offering sites for decision by the sponsoring department, and serves as the technical support during the design process. The National Capital Commission will then manage the construction of the monument and its maintenance in the long term. The National Capital Commission's role in the design competition of this monument was to act as the technical authority and joint contracting authority. In this role, the National Capital Commission managed the technical review of the applicants, ensuring that the designs put forward for consideration met the technical requirements of the site and federal land use, design, and transaction approval. It will be interesting to hear from them about the previous site selection chosen by the Conservative government, but also the process to build the monument. And Mr. Chair, we heard from veterans at the conclusion of the last meeting.
Excuse me, j'ai une demande d'intervention, un point d'ordre de Monsieur Désilet.
Mr. Désilet, my question is for our clerk. We don't have the amendment in French. I think, it's rather unfortunate to have this done at the last minute. I think it should be translated, and I'd like to ask how we can debate an amendment if we don't have it tabled in both official languages. The analyst is translating it. Even my Anglophone colleagues who don't have a copy in English, well, come on. What we might suggest, if members agree, well, the analyst is translating it. We can suspend. Well, we can debate in the meantime and decide whether or not it is in order. Yes, it is in order. And you'll soon get in your email the amendment in both official languages.
Est-ce que...
Point of order.
Yeah.
Chair, just on Monsieur Désilet's, we can suspend for a few minutes if they need time to do that, if that's okay.
Yeah, ben...
Seriez trop heureux.
Bon, OK. Bon, d'accord. Donc, je comprends que...
So, I understand that members do not want to suspend the debate. Mr. Désilet, Chair, Mr. Casey had begun his intervention saying they'd taken the time to analyze the situation. You've seen it, but is that a point of order? I understand. So thank you. Excuse me. But I now give the floor to Mr. Casey. Thank you, Chair. I'm very sorry, and I offer my apologies for having not been better prepared to present this amendment. I hope that Mr. Désilet won't feel disadvantaged in this and that he will soon get the amendment in the language of Molière, and that he will take the opportunity to present his arguments. I hope that there will be arguments in favor of the amendment, and I quite agree with the comments made by my colleague, Mr. Sarai. It seems to me that this is something, I think perhaps it would be fair to suspend so that people can read and analyze what has been presented so that no one is disadvantaged. If not, I will continue. Should I start again, or? Now, if you wish to reread the amendment or else explain why you are tabling this amendment, you're free to do as you wish. Mr. Casey.
I want to come back to something that I had mentioned at the last meeting, but also something that arose at the conclusion of the last meeting. So at the last meeting, there were several discussions with the veterans who were here, who were of the mistaken impression that the proceedings before this committee would cause a delay in the construction of the monument. So I just want to state on the record that that is absolutely not the case, that the National Capital Commission, in their testimony before us, will assure us of that, that the processes that govern the timelines around the construction of the monument, around the content of the documents, is one that the National Capital Commission is intimately involved in. The timing of the construction, the drafting of the execution of the legal documents is something that does not require the involvement, does not require the approval, and does not require any action on the part of this committee. What we are seeing here is purely an exercise in politics, purely an exercise, quite frankly, in theater. It has nothing to do with the contractual legal obligations between Team Stimson, the Government of Canada, or the National Capital Commission. All of the aspects of that relationship that govern the construction of the documents are in a legal and not a political sphere. We have read in the media that Team Daou hopes to be able to resolve their dissatisfaction with the process outside of the court process. The court process remains available to them. If there was to be a court process, there would be something called discovery of documents. There would be something called discovery of witnesses. There is a duty under any civil proceeding to produce all documents relevant to any issue in the action. There is a duty in any civil proceeding for anyone who has any testimony that is relevant to any matter to be compellable at an examination for discovery. It's an entirely different process. If there was to be a legal action launched, an interim or interlocutory measure available to the parties would be to seek an injunction. None of those things have happened. All of those things have the potential of delaying this, but this hearing doesn't. And the National Capital Commission will be able to provide testimony to that effect, because my grave concern at the conclusion of the last meeting is that that idea had been planted in the head of our veterans, and they deserve better. And the fact that they deserve better is the very reason why the Stimson design was chosen, because we listened to veterans, we haven't misinformed them, we haven't misled them, and the testimony of the National Capital Commission will ensure that our interest in putting veterans first will be borne out through the testimony before this committee. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Casey. And on my list, please.
You're covering it for 'em, so don't get on your high horse, buddy.
Okay, member of the committee, please, let's go to Ms. Hefner. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to reiterate what my colleague, Mr. Casey, was saying. Thank you, Mr. Casey, for those excellent remarks. And just to underline for any veterans who have been following this committee that this monument is being built. Whatever is happening here at committee is political. It's not holding up the construction of that monument. And I think it absolutely makes sense to bring the National Capital Commission here to hear from them for all the reasons that my colleague, Mr. Casey, outlined. And so I will happily support this amendment.
Thank you very much, Ms. Blaney. Now I have Ms. Hefner, sorry, because I have right after you, Ms. Blaney.
Well, thank you. This is an interesting amendment, and I just got it in my email, so thank you for that. I of course, I have concerns about there being extra committee meetings on this issue because we do have the women's report, which I brought with me. I'm getting through it. Again, the analyst, I think, has done an incredible job. I'm really enjoying it. And of course, we also have a study where we have now told one of the witnesses, who is a veteran twice, that we were canceling it. And that does concern me. I met with her earlier this week to talk to her about a few issues, and that definitely came up as a concern, and she expressed her frustration. So I'm really listening to her. So I don't have an amendment in my brain, but I'm wondering if we could talk about perhaps having the committee send a letter to get that confirmation back. Then it doesn't take up time in terms of testimony, but allows the committee to write a letter to make sure, of course, that the needs that the veterans have and the concerns that you brought forward, that they're addressed. So I'm just wondering if that would be something, if I propose that, if Mr. Casey would be interested in entertaining it.
Yes, and before I go to Mr. Casey, I have Mr. May, unless that Mr. May would like Mr. Casey to respond to Ms. Blaney. Please, Mr. Casey, and after that, Mr. May. Please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I guess I would have two responses to Ms. Blaney's question. Number one, she wouldn't need my consent to make an amendment, to make a sub-amendment, but if she was inclined to make a sub-amendment along the lines that she just described, she would have it.
Thank you, Mr. Casey. Mr. Brian May.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to lend my support for this this amendment because I think it is very important that we clear the record. The last couple of meetings where we have had numerous conversations in this place, there have been a number of times where folks have suggested that the monument itself is being delayed as a result of what's happening here. And there are delays that are happening, but not for the monument. The delays that are occurring are of course, the women's study that we have in front of us. Again, I will agree with my honorable colleague that the analysts have done an incredible job with. But there are 6 or 7 others, and I have spent a lot of time going through those and reminding members here and folks watching at home that we've agreed to a number of other studies that are critically important to the veterans that I speak to. And the folks that I do speak to about this issue, their only issue is that the monument needs to be built as quickly as possible. So to hear from the National Capital Region, I think, is really important. I think it would be, whether that's through a letter, whether that's through their witness testimony, I think it's important to not just set the record straight here for us, but to reassure the veterans that are watching this very closely that the work in building something like this, that does take time, but it is not being delayed as a result of what I've dubbed a deep sea fishing exercise. I think that we do need to see that record corrected, and I wholeheartedly support this amendment. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I have Ms. Blaney, and after Mrs. Wagenthal. Ms. Blaney.
So I would like to move a sub-amendment to delete the first part, the to invite the, and instead have the committee write a letter to the NCC and then leave everything else as it is. I think I've got it correct. So that will be what I propose.
Okay, thank you. And right now, the clerk is looking at it, and I'm pretty sure that the analysts will help them to translate, and we will send it as the previous one to all members of the committee. And we would like you, please, Ms. Blaney, to repeat again your sub-amendment, please.
All right. So what I'm saying is that we would delete to invite the from what Mr. Casey proposed and add in that space to have the committee write a letter to the NCC. And then everything else would stay the same. So in regards to their role and on. Was that helpful?
Is that okay? Yes? Eh? All right, that's okay. Okay, thank you for that. And well, I don't know. First of all, I have Mrs. Wagenthal, and I saw three of you guys, but I don't know which one was first. Casey, Sarai, and Hefner. Yes, Mrs. Wagenthal.
Thank you, Chair. So I just want to understand the dynamics of this motion and amendment. So Mr. Casey is saying that the NCC and the government and the architect or creator of the monument that they recommended and chose are going ahead with the building of the monument that the government chose over top of their procurement group that was given that responsibility. I want to just understand that first. And am I understanding that correctly, that it's irrelevant, really, what would come out of this committee, which the study was about the procedure, not about the monument itself. We've heard from our veterans as well the frustration over the fact that, once again, the government is doing things outside of their own rules. And when you serve in the military, transparency, following orders, doing things appropriately is really important to them. So that side of it is still an issue. And I would just like to, on top of that, we are all here very engaged with the veterans that were here this last week. And I would like to know, Mr. Casey, who specifically did you speak to and get this perspective from out of the witnesses that, or those that were here as guests this last week actually spoke with you, or you spoke with them following the meeting?
Thank you, Mrs. Wagenthal. And I have Mr. Casey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So, first of all, my understanding of Ms. Blaney's suggestion was that there would be a letter in addition to a witness, but the sub-amendment appears to choose a letter over a witness. So I prefer the and to the or. So my indication that she would have my agreement was based on my misunderstanding that there would be a letter and a witness, but what I'm hearing is that she wants a letter instead of a witness. I think it would be of significantly more value to the committee to have someone from the NCC to be able to answer our questions, as opposed to a letter that may not answer all of our questions. So while I'm happy to see a letter, I'm not happy to see a letter replace a witness. Yep.
Excuse me, Mr. Casey. I think that bells are ringing. So we have a break. We have a vote in 30 minutes.
Can we have unanimous consent to sit through the
Yes,
balance?
that's what I'm going to ask members of the committee. In 29 minutes, we're going to have vote. So I ask members of the committee, do I have unanimous consent to continue before the vote? I don't have unanimous consent. So la rencontre est suspendue.
Meeting suspended. right, we will be resuming our sitting.
Come, Tim Lewis is replacing Wilson Miao, and but on the list we have an sub-amendment on the floor, and on the list I have Mr. Kesse, Mr. Surai, and Ms. Hepner. But members of the committee, let me say something. You know, as chair of the committee, I'm a little bit concerned because it's been a few meetings that we are discussing this motion. And I don't want to cut debate at all. No, that's not my hope. But I'd like to tell you that we have 16 meetings left till June. And I remind you that we have a lot of things to do. And the clerk always asks me, we need an agenda to be able to continue our study. So please do whatever you want, but have that in mind in order to be able to continue our work plan. Thank you. So now, Mr. Kesse, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, I found your remarks very compelling, and I will close my comments at this point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And now I have Mr. Surai, and after that, Ms. Hepner. Mr. Surai.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Oh, yes, yes.
Oh, I thought, okay. I just want to know what time we're going till, Mr. Chair?
Well, first of all, basically, when we have a meeting of 2 hours, we have 2 more hours to go on. But I have to mention that this meeting started on Monday. So we basically have 2 hours, but I consult the clerk. We can, if the committee is agree on that, we can go until 1950 or 7:50. If the committee agree, but someone can say that I have other engagements, so we will have to vote if we have to continue, because now it's more than 6:30. Yes, you finish? You have the floor before. Okay.
I have the floor, but if there's a
okay, yes,
point of
Mr.
order,
Richards has a point of order.
So, Chair, my understanding was a little different than what you've just indicated. My understanding was that for tonight's meetings, there was an understanding that I think was well aware ahead of time that there's quite likely going to be some interruptions with votes. And my understanding is that whips have all been, it's been indicated or agreed with the whips that we would all have 2 hours of meeting time at minimum available to us. We've used 24 minutes at this point. So, if I look at the math there, I think that takes us further than what you've indicated. But I've also understand that there is resources available for one committee to do 2 further hours. So I think we could certainly go longer than that. I have a desire. I would like to see this resolved. I think many of the members around the table would like this resolved. I certainly believe we should use all of the resources that are available to this committee to ensure we get a resolution to this. So that, as you just said, Chair, very wisely, I will point out that we need to get to some of the other things we're dealing with, and so let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's get this motion dealt with, and let's use all of the resources that are available to us this evening, and use the time we have until 8. I believe it was 8:30 we could go till. So.
Yeah, but before I go back to Mr. Surai, let me say that the clerk, we start that meeting at 5:15. So the clerk has already made the calculation, taking care of the vote. So we said that we can go till 7:50. But if the committee would like to go further, we're going to have to, yes.
So Chair, my understanding was different than that. My understanding was we were told we were allowed 2 hours of actual meeting time.
Yes.
Not 2 hours from the start of the meeting, 2 hours of actual meeting time, which means we have an hour and 36 minutes remaining in that. Plus, we have the availability of resources beyond that. So I believe we have until 8:30. Correct me if I'm wrong. I know we have one of the whips in the room. She might be able to.
But what I'm saying, we're not going to go back to Monday to make the calculation. But today, we start at 5:15, and taking care of the 2 votes, we can, for this meeting, for those 2 hours, we can go till 7:50. But if committee members required to go further, we're going to make sure that we have enough resources to go further than 7:50, right? Okay, so on the list now, just remind you, I have Mr. Sarai, Ms. Hefner, Mrs. Wagenthal, Ms. Blaney, and Monsieur Desilets. Alors, Monsieur Sarai.
So I just want to be clear. I think my colleague might have misled. I don't believe the whips have any agreement in regards to extending this beyond 6:30. So I don't know of any other whips office that has had that agreement, but I can certainly tell you that our whips office has not agreed to that. I've actually heard from other members, I won't say, but who have other things to do. So I don't see we have agreement on extending this time past 6:30.
Just a second, please. Okay, thank you. Mr. Sarai, my understanding is now it's, like you said, more than 6:30, but I'd like to know if members of the committee would like to go further, 6:30, so we need to vote in order to go, like I said, to 7:50. And maybe 7:50 or maybe more if we have resources available until 8:30, something like that. So you have to be clear on what is your intervention.
No,
Please.
I was asking for clarity. I guess you just said, so you need unanimous consent to go farther?
No, we don't. I don't need unanimous consent. We
Okay.
just have to vote if we want to continue till 7:50 or not.
Okay, so I will ask you to put it to a vote.
Okay. Well, okay. So first of all, let's ask members before we take the vote. Do we have unanimous consent to adjourn the meeting? Yeah. No. No. Okay. No, we don't have. So we're going to have to vote on that. So I'd like to be clear that we're going to vote on that, but clearly it's to adjourn the meeting. Yeah. Okay. Please, the clerk will take the vote.
Mr. Casey? Mr. Casey?
Yes.
Ms. Hefner?
Yes.
Mr. May?
Oui.
Mr. Lois?
Yes.
Mr. Sarai?
Oui.
Mr. Dardo?
No,
Mr. Richards?
not a chance.
Mr. Tolmy?
No.
Ms. Wagenthal?
No.
Monsieur Desilets?
No.
Ms. Blaney?
No.
Yes, 5. Nays, 6.
Merci. Donc, c'est donc rejeté.
Thank you. So it is defeated. Mr. Sarai, you were the last to have the floor. Then Ms. Hepfner, Ms. Wagenthal, Ms. Blaney, and Mr. Desilets. Let us continue.
Thank you, Chair. I want to just make sure, are we on the amendment of my, of Ms. Blaney's amendment, or the amendment that Mr. Casey had?
No, we have the sub-amendment from Ms. Blaney on the floor to
So we're-
discuss.
Yeah. So as my colleague, Mr. Casey, said, and I think he spoke to some here, I was at a 3-day forum of veterans run by Veterans Affairs Canada, and then a 1-day forum of the 2 days on women veterans in Canada and in Montreal. And I had the opportunity to speak to dozens and dozens of veterans and listen to them actually in their testimonials as well and their panels. The one thing that consistently came up is they want it done. They want to know what the progress is. They don't want to. They don't like watching this. They did not want to know the debate on the location anymore, the design anymore. They just want it done. I did not actually, in the dozens of conversations that I had, not once did I have somebody give opposition to the selected design or say otherwise. There was very loud, vocal proponents who said that enough time has been enough. We need a monument. I think what Mr. Casey is saying is a reflection of those testimonies, where people want to know what the progress is. They want to know if the location is firmed, what the National Capital Commission is doing, what Veterans is doing, how the procurement of the process is going along, what's the timelines, what are the architectural consultants and other consultants stating. So I think it's important that we call them before and we bring them forward to this. I think it would be good to get their written submission as well, but I think what Mr. Casey's saying, we need the National Capital Commission, as well as I believe it was other officials from VAC or otherwise, to come and give an update, so that I think all the veterans that watch us and pay attention to this or read the journals and any other blogs or news sources get an update as to what is happening with this. We've all heard from testimony from the department as well as the minister that there is, for the design panelists, maybe the ones that weren't successful, they have a process by which they can adjudicate the decision. They can appeal the decision. They can do that. I think some of that time period has passed, so therefore my assumption is that they've accepted it, but I'm sure there's other judicial means by which they could do it, and that's something the department would have to deal with. And I think compensation is already something that our VAC officials have said that it's something they've prepared to offer, because they felt that the importance of our veteran population and the choice that they want should be reflected. And that was, as we've stated earlier in the survey, over 11,000, which a majority of which are veterans or serving members or family members of veterans. And it's fairly broad. No survey of any type we've ever seen, and we all come from different political parties. Any polls, any data that we have is ever perfect. They all have margins of error, but I think when you have a majority where 2/3 or more are indicating an appreciation, or that one commemorates and reflects better than the other, that gives you insight as to what people want. So I think it's time that we carry on and we bring those in and get, if there is a conclusion to this chapter, I think it would be to get an update on when this monument is being built, when it's starting, when shovels in the ground, and when can veterans pay homage to it, and the Canadian public and our students and visitors alike can see the sacrifices that our veterans have made for not only our country but the freedom of others oceans away. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sarai. And now let's get to Lisa Hepfner, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the sub-amendment, I want to say that I appreciate the reasons that Ms. Blaney brought forward that sub-amendment. I do think that we need to move on from this study and get to some more substantive work. However, like my colleague, Mr. Casey, said, I don't know that a letter is going to be sufficient. I think we really need to hear from witnesses from the National Capital Commission to be able to ask them questions to make sure that the dialogue is fulsome and that we get all the answers that we're looking for. So I would not be supporting the sub-amendment. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And now let's get to Mrs. Wagenthal.
Well, thank you, Chair. I know that we're debating the sub-amendment. However, I just want to mention that I had asked a question on the major motion by Mr. Casey of the change, and I had asked him specifically because we're discussing something here on the basis of an inference that feedback came to Mr. Casey directly from these veterans, and we had those conversations with them as well. So I'm just asking if he would please share with this room who the people were that he spoke with so that we have clarity on who he received this information from. It sounds a lot like an unscientific poll that determined veterans made a certain decision, and I would like to know who those people were, please. So we have clarity and transparency and following of rules, as our veterans love to see and see us operating in this place in the same way we expect them to do that as they serve us overseas and here at home in Canada.
Thank you, Mrs. Wagenthal, for your intervention. And I invite Ms. Blaney to take the floor.
I call the vote.
Well, I still have people on the list, so...
I guess they can talk, but I'm ready to vote.
Oh, great. Okay, thanks. So, j'ai Monsieur Desilets qui veut...
Mr. Desilets, you have the floor. I will give up my turn. Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak to Ms. Blaney's sub-amendment? No? All right. Then we will now vote. Is there unanimous consent to adopt? I heard a no earlier, so I think it would be preferable to go to a vote because Ms. Hefner. On the sub-amendment, on Ms. Blaney's sub-amendment.
Against?
Ms. Hefner,
Contre.
Mr. May,
No.
Mr. Lewis,
Against.
Mr. Sarai,
No.
Mr. Dordon,
In favor.
Mr. Richards,
Yes.
Mr. Tolmy,
In favor.
Ms. Wagenthal,
En faveur.
Monsieur Desilets,
En faveur.
Ms. Blaney,
In favor.
6. Nays contre 5, yes pour 6.
Alors,
So the sub-amendment presented by Ms. Blaney is adopted. It carries.
Donc maintenant, nous revenons.
Now we will come back to Mr. Casey's amendment as amended by Ms. Blaney's sub-amendment. Mr. Casey.
So what we have before us now is an amended amendment that is requesting a letter from the National Capital Commission, but no witness. My concern, as I had expressed earlier, is that if the letter raises questions, we will be no further ahead. And I think that we're putting ourselves at a disadvantage. I think the letter is of some value, but certainly not the value of having someone there to be able to take our questions. So I do think it's unfortunate. I hope that the answers that we want from the National Capital Commission could form the basis of questions in terms of the requests that we make. So if the letter that is sent to the National Capital Commission sets forth the concerns that have been raised here in the committee with respect to their role, with respect to the questions that are evident in the representations from Ms. Wagenthal and from Ms. Blaney, the perception that this committee has some authority to delay the proceedings, and the questioning of what's out there in the veterans community, and the demand for people to come forward and be named. There certainly wasn't such a demand when we were talking about the counseling of Veterans Affairs employees towards some veterans. That's for sure. So those would be my concerns over this amended motion, is that it's watered down, and I think the only way to save it is by a pretty detailed request to the National Capital Commission in terms of what needs to be in the letter and what we need to know. I'm very concerned that the letter is going to raise more questions than answers.
Thank you very much, Mr. Casey and Mr. Sarai.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to my colleague, Mr. Casey, highlighting some of the concerns. I think if with this amendment, the problem we're going to have is we will only get a written submission. You won't be able to ask questions. It may be a simple one-pager that might not outline much more than that they were proceeding with things. We need to know how far they are, if there is a holdup. Sometimes some of these projects are material-wise unique. I think I was reading on the Stimson design. It's elements of healing. It's a concept of a medicine wheel. Its design takes form in a circular sacred space of safety. It's a home base. It's a place for reflection, memory, and contemplation. So it has 4 portals. I think it's designed with Corten steel walls that surround to protect those places, and these are things that the veterans and others and people like ourselves would want to know. Are they being formulated? Are they being worked on as we speak? Is the artist already commissioned and doing their artistic nature? Because a lot of it is structural in nature that would be put in place, and I think it would be imperative that we have them here. So I think when we get a letter only, it might fall short of what we require, and others will think of that again and say, how long is this going to take? There's also a doubt raised, as my colleague said, whether or not they're moving forward with this or not, or is this study delaying that or not? I think that we'd like to have clarity. My understanding is it's not being delayed by this study. It's moving forward, and if anything, I think what we needed with this study was to figure out the process. The process has been given pretty clearly by the department, how it was. Yes, it did deviate, and that deviation was stated, and therefore a decision was made. And so I think everybody's aware of that. There's no secret about it. There's no deception on this. I think it's very clear. The reasons for it are also very clear. I think that's been stated. So I think an update showing how far the procurement process is. We've seen with the House of Commons construction and others, there are certain trades that are probably in high use, like stonemasons and others, that would be a tough one to procure at this time, as I believe there's only a handful of stonemasons in the country, and they all basically work on this. I don't know if this particular design is using anything along that lines. There's also a lot of bronze work. I think for bronze flak jackets, usually the artist has to do the molds first, test the molds, and then subsequently they will be made into bronze. So I think we should have them. I think it would be very important to get an update. I would actually probably gone further and maybe asked that the architect and the visual artist, as well as the coordinator, Adrian Stimson, the MBTW Group and LeewWeb projects all kind of coming up here, because they'll actually have the real update based on what they've been consulted and what they've been doing. So that would be my opinion. So I think this is going to end up falling short.
Thank you, Mr. Randeep Sarai. Now let's go to Ms. Hefner.
Thank you, Chair. And I'd like to thank my colleagues for raising concerns. I have similar concerns. If we're sending a letter asking the National Capital Commission for details, I think it has to be a very detailed letter. Perhaps this committee can collaborate on what exactly we're asking for, but I think, well, sorry, I'm being interrupted by the other side. Did you want to take the floor, Terry?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, please. Yes.
Are you done? Can I?
No, Ms. Hefner, you have the floor. Please continue, please.
Thank you. So I think it's very important how we word this letter and the details that we ask for from the National Capital Commission. I think we should consult as a committee on what is exactly in that letter. I would have preferred also, like my colleagues, to have had a witness that we could question back and forth and make sure that all of our questions are answered. So those are my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And who else? Oh, who? Oh, Mr. Casey, sorry. Mr. Casey.
Chair, just a few suggestions in terms of what might be included in the letter. First of all, a clear statement of the purpose of the monument, as the committee is well aware. It is to recognize the commitment and sacrifice of Canadians who served in Afghanistan and the support provided to them at home. Some details on the location, how the location was chosen, and the National Capital Commission's jurisdiction over that location, just across the street from the War Museum and near the National Holocaust Monument. Some description by the Commission of their role. It's my understanding that their role is one of design and construction of other monuments, and how their experience in the design and construction of other monuments will be brought to bear in connection with this particular one. Perhaps some indication of similar projects, lessons learned, their role in terms of the coordination of government departments, the technical support that they provide during the design process, and some sense for what they envision in terms of their management of the construction of the monument. The timeline for the construction, it's my understanding that it is to be ready for public viewing in 2027. But a clearer timeline for this committee would be of some assistance. My understanding as well that the National Capital Commission is charged with the maintenance of the site in the long term. So some particulars around that. The National Capital Commission had a role in the design competition. It is the design competition that is the subject of this motion, so a description of their role in the design competition. And specifically their role in the design competition was a technical one and a joint contracting authority. So a little bit more information on what is involved in being the technical authority and the joint contracting authority. Joint contracting authority clearly implies some level of collaboration or cooperation or a joint effort with other parties. It would be good to know who has which roles, how exactly they manage the technical review of the applicants. We know that there were 5 applications. We know that the jury arrived at a decision, and then after broad consultation with the veterans community, there was a decision taken not to accept the jury's recommendation. So the role, if any, from a technical perspective of the National Capital Commission in all of that, if any, and if not, just exactly what was their role in terms of the technical review of the applicants. We know that the review in terms of seeking feedback on a, if you will, an emotional or a symbolic level was one that was undertaken by government, but clearly the technical elements of the decision would be one where you might expect the National Capital Commission to be involved. And then the various approval processes. So there would be technical requirements at the site, there would be technical requirements associated with the use of federal lands, with the design, and also with the transaction. So they clearly had a detailed role. I think all of these things are pertinent to the committee's examination. There was also, as much as there is some controversy and disagreement around the selection of the company, of the proponent to design the monument, there was also some controversy around the site selection. The National Capital Commission was by necessity intimately involved in the site selection. That is, in fact, their role as the authority for public lands in the National Capital Region, for federal lands in the National Capital Region. So some synopsis from them around the site selection and also the process to build the monument. So I'm just trying to paint a picture of the level of detail that I think we should be able to expect from someone if they were sitting here and subject to questions from all of us. And I would hope that that sort of information at that level of detail would be something that would be that we could reasonably expect in a letter coming from them. So I offer those suggestions in terms of the mandate that we put forward to the National Capital Commission for the letter that we're seeking. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kissy. But let me be clear. The sub-amendment presented by Ms. Blenny said that to have the committee write a letter. So maybe the clerk and either the analysts, if the motion pass, they can propose a letter, but it's the committee who has the final word on that letter. So all of the things you would like to put in that letter, it's belong to the committee. Okay, so let's move on and let's go to Ms. Hefner.
Thank you. I also, just based on your previous comments, Chair, I would like to know the process for how we're writing the letter. I thought Mr. Casey had some excellent suggestions.
Please, guys. No, come on, guys. Listen. Well. Excuse me, guys. Excuse me.
Crazy.
Excuse me. Please, guys, members of the committee, please stop, interrupt your colleagues. Ms. Hefner has the floor, so we can listen, and after that, when it will be your turn. And also, you have to think about our translators. They want, there's going to be a cacophony. They can translate anything. So please do not interrupt each other. Ms. Hefner.
Thank you for that, Chair. I was also concerned about how this letter was being put together. I liked a lot of what Mr. Casey was saying, and I was hoping that the analyst or someone was collecting that information and we could talk about it more so we could come to a decision. It's a committee letter that you said, but how do we come to an agreement over how that letter is worded. When is that going to happen? What's that process? And can we include that very fulsome list of suggestions that Mr. Casey just went over? I think that those are excellent ones, and I'm hoping that we have those documented somewhere.
Yeah, I can explain. The process is, first of all, you can add anything that you want as a member of the committee in that letter to be able to be acceptable for the committee. But the process is, right now we are discussing, we just vote on the sub-amendment of Ms. Blaney. So now we're back to the amendment of Mr. Casey, duly amended. So we are discussing that. So we have to vote on that, and if that amendment or the motion pass, we will have to discuss that later. So we can say when and how we're going to have that later, but we have to think about our work plan, like I said at the beginning. Alors, je suis prêt à entendre.
So I'm ready to hear from any others on the list with respect to this amendment, this amended amendment that we have on the table.
So I would actually like to propose a sub-amendment to this amendment, that if the response from the National Capital Commission requires further information by this committee, that members of the National Capital Commission responsible for the memorial, for the monument, be asked to come before this committee. Sure. That the sub-amendment be that if the response from the National Capital Commission is not satisfactory to the committee or requires further questions, that members responsible for the construction of the monument be asked to appear before the committee for no more than one meeting.
Okay, listen, I'm going to suspend a few seconds to consult the clerk on that amendment. Won't be long.
So please, Mr. Sarai, tell us the subject of your amendment, please.
Chair, I think it's just imperative that we, I think the goal of Mr. Casey's originally was to make sure that they come before and appear, but in light of the committee's vote that, and I guess Ms. Blaney's concern for time allocated towards a meeting, I think it would be imperative that if we're not satisfied with the letter, we have the ability to call those officials. The officials can come in, they can give an update. Some have construction backgrounds. They would like to have a full, wholesome update. Others would just want to know it's being built. I think most veterans probably want to know it's being built and not that there's a shovel in the ground and then we have a 12-month wait or something for steel or some other item or material that's required to build a monument, or in case there's still other further studies that sometimes come with these kind of construction projects, including geotechnical or environmental assessments, or in some cases archaeological checks to make sure that there's no pre-existing habitat or artifacts that might be there. So I think it's important. It's important to have that update, and it's important to have that ability to get that information when and if it's not a wholesome answer. And we've all been through many committees before where we sometimes request a department or a National Capital Commission or another governmental agency or department, and we don't get a clear answer. It's a diplomatic or I'd say a bureaucratic answer, and our expectations was something else. So just to enable that or ensure that, that's why we like having live officials to come before us, be able to answer those questions, and just as many opposition members wish to have a minister or a departmental official or a past minister come before. Others would like to have officials that are responsible for the projects at hand, and we should have them before this. Again, I want to reiterate that we've had more than 12,000 Canadians that have been surveyed that want this.
Excuse me, Mr. Sarai, we have a point of order.
Just wondering if Mr. Sarai would apply that principle to the two ministers, former ministers that have already said.
Yeah,
It's not a point of order.
Would he encourage them?
Mr. Richards,
on the same point of
is
order.
not a point of order. Is not a point of order. Mr. Sean Casey,
Just
point of
on the
order.
same point of order, Mr. Chair, I would point out that Mr. Richards wanting to interrupt someone does not constitute a point of order. I don't think you'll find it anywhere in any of the standing orders.
Yeah.
Yet it's something that happens repeatedly.
Mr.
And it's
Casey,
entirely unfair and disrespectful to his colleagues here in the committee.
Mr. Casey, I understand that, but as soon as, excuse me, as soon as a member said it's a point of order, I have to listen the few seconds to make sure that it's the point of order or not. So that's why he has the floor. But members, once again, please try to do not interrupt. Try to do not bullying colleagues. So it's really important. And we are not in camera. We have a lot of veterans and people are watching us. So please, let's continue. So, who has Randeep Sarai? You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's a very important what you were actually just delving into. I think if you look, colleagues should not interrupt other colleagues. It's been becoming a pattern of it. In fact, actually, you as chair has been interrupted, and just moments ago you were interrupted. And we've had witnesses who've flown away from far and wide to give their very deep and emotional stories of how they were treated and what they went through. They have been interrupted by similar members who just interrupted here, and they made it a point of that. They've actually they've complained about it. They've written about that, and it was deeply upsetting for them, despite us having a training done to the contrary to understand them. I think committees owe respect to each other. We all have our allotted times. We all have our allotted times based on the party standings. everybody gets their turn and everybody's hands are taken. And I think, if anything, Mr. Chair, your liberty is very generous, and your impartiality is without question. And so, if anything, we might sometimes complain that you are too generous with your allotments, but I will say I think respect from colleagues across the aisle is very important. So going back to that, that's one of the reasons why I think when we do call witnesses or we ask for them to write, you always have to have the opportunity that if you need further questions, that we have the liberty to asking. No different than when we have witnesses who sometimes they have 10 minutes to speak or 5 minutes to speak. They have a round of questions and they still feel that they were not able to satisfy and give all their information. And usually you as chair has been very liberal in always reminding them that you're more than welcome to give written submissions, and sometimes they're a page or two, and sometimes they're dozens and maybe even up to 100 pages that different witnesses have given in. But that's the beauty of our parliament, is that we afford everyone the opportunity to contribute. Our Westminster model of parliament strives on the examination of one another and to get to answers, to find out. We have a responsibility to taxpayers and Canadian citizens that we're doing the most responsible thing at all given times, and therefore we have to have that onus that in the event that we're not satisfied with it, we're here for our constituents, and in this particular case, veterans constituents, to commemorate them. And the last thing I would want to tell them is that we got a letter, but we weren't able to ask them anything because we never tried to. So I would attempt to that this is an important thing, and I'm not saying it's going to take any extra time. If it's voted for, and I urge my colleagues to vote for it, that it's only in the inevitability that the response we get from the National Capital Commission is unsatisfactory. At that point in time, we would decide as a committee if we feel like we need to call them, and I think it's a reasonable amendment. So I urge my colleagues to vote for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Randip Sarai. Mr. Sean Casey.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank my colleague for this sub-amendment. It'll probably come as no great surprise to you, Mr. Chair, that I found his reasoning to be very compelling, and I'll be supporting the sub-amendment. Due primarily to the fact that it gives us an option B, or it gives us an insurance policy. The level of detail that I think the committee deserves from the National Capital Commission doesn't lend itself well to a letter, so I think it's entirely possible that after receiving the letter there will be some additional questions. Maybe I'm wrong. Ms. Blaney was absolutely within her rights to make the sub-amendment she did to substitute the letter. I expect the motivation behind the sub-amendment was one of efficiency, which is also admirable. However, it in something that has taken on the character that this discussion has, it strikes me that we should that if we're going there, we should leave no stone unturned. And this will ensure that happens. So it gives us an option B that we don't have to use if the letter is as comprehensive as we require, and I'll be supporting it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Casey. And we're still discussing. Are there any other interventions on that? So, Mr. Rich.
Just to say that we wouldn't be supporting adding any additional further witnesses until the ministers that have actual knowledge of the period in time that we're talking about, who refuse to come to this committee, choose to come. We won't be supporting bringing any additional witnesses in.
Mr. Chair, just a point of order in that. Is he asking for a sub-amendment to add that in as a condition of this? I just want to know.
OK, bon. Alors, j'ai pas d'autres interventions.
Well, I have no other speakers, so we will now put to a vote the sub-amendment I was thinking of the other, but we will now put the sub-amendment presented by Mr. Sarai to a vote. So I will now ask the clerk to count the votes. Thank you. Please.
En faveur.
Ms. Hefner,
En faveur.
Mr. May,
Yep.
Mr. Lewis,
In favor.
Mr. Sarai,
Yes.
Mr. Dodo,
Opposed.
Mr. Richards, Mr. Tolmie,
Opposed.
Ms. Wagenton,
Opposed. Kathy? Opposed.
Monsieur Desilets,
Yeah, I oppose.
Monsieur Desilets,
Contre.
Ms. Blaney. Ms.
Support.
Blaney,
Ms. Blaney?
Yes, I support it.
Supported. Thank you.
Yes pour 6, nays contre 5.
Monsieur Randip Sarai, donc
Mr. Randip Sarai, your sub-amendment has passed.
maintenant nous allons
Now we will continue the debate on Mr. Casey's amendment as amended by the Mr. Sarai's sub-amendment and Ms. Blaney's sub-amendment. There you go. And would anyone like to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think we've landed in the right spot with this in terms of making sure that these witnesses will be heard, and if the letter is proves to be insufficient, we'll have the opportunity now to call them forward. But it does pain me over here as well to suggest that we extend this even further. The women's study is in front of us. I don't know why that is not the priority of the opposition at this point to get to, but it's clearly not. And I think that it's important that, again, I reiterate, this study is in front of us. The work of this committee is to get these studies into the House, get the recommendations to the government in a timely fashion, and that is being threatened right now. So I think it's important that with the sub-amendment that was just passed, as many of you know, many of you have been here, all of you have been in committees for a while now, and there are questions that come up even after intervention from witnesses, and I suspect there will be questions, from the letter that we'll receive, hopefully in a timely fashion, from those that are tasked in building this monument for our veterans. And I suspect we'll have that opportunity. But I would strongly encourage this committee to move off of this issue, to move towards the women's study report that we have in front of us. That's what veterans are asking us to do. That's what veterans are waiting for. We also have many other studies in front of us, including others that I've gone into great detail in the past, reminding this committee. We need to get to those studies. As you rightfully pointed out, Mr. Chair, at the beginning of this meeting, we have a very limited number of meetings left. I think you said, correct me, I think you said 16, which may sound like a large number for those at home, but when you consider the runway that we have in front of us and you consider the slate of agreed upon motions that are in front of us, it's not. And I can tell you, we will not get done what we should have been able to get done because of this, again, mission creep on this study. We know that we all know that governing and the work that we do up here is about making choices. And we know that the opposition is making a very clear choice here to push for this study, push for, again, an opportunity, in their mind, to embarrass the government, to stall this committee. Was very pleased to hear Mr. Casey's intervention today that suggested that despite our inability in this committee to get things done, National Capital is not in any way hampered by that. And that I hope is a comfort to veterans that are watching this. And I think we need to continue to encourage the National Capital Region to do the work that they are entrusted to do, to make sure that they have the resources necessary to do that work and continue that work. We know that much has gone into the design, much has gone into the planning, and we started from a really rough spot. We know that the previous government's choice to put this monument under a bridge was not well thought out. I've talked to veterans who had written letters to the previous government saying, please reconsider this. And I think it's imperative that we recognize that there's a lot of trust that we need to build back on this project. That there's a lot of concern out there that this project is sliding again, and I am looking forward to that letter from the National Capital and being able to show veterans this work is moving forward in a timely fashion. That said, I think I would have hoped over the 2-week break that the opposition on this committee would have reflected on some of the interventions myself and my colleagues made in previous meetings discussing this, and recognize the importance of this committee and the importance that veterans place on this committee. I'm often in committee we kind of question whether anybody's paying attention. And I've been the chair of committee, and I talk to people about, I'm sorry, you guys thought that was funny, but I assure you it's not to veterans. And I assure you that they are paying attention. And I, as the chair of this committee for a couple of years, I learned very quickly how much of an audience there actually is for this committee, and how important this committee is, and how diligent the members watch this proceeding. And I think it's the opposition clearly see that as a joke. They're laughing, they're chatting over me right now, but it's not a joke. It's incredibly important to keep in mind as we're doing this work in public, which is again not the convention. The convention typically is to do this work in camera, so we can have those challenging conversations and tough conversations sometimes to get to the right spot to where we need to do what's best for the subject matter of the day. And I think doing this in public, I hope people start to recognize and start to encourage their members of parliament to move on, to get to a point where we can really focus on the strong issues of the day that veterans face, and that we rededicate ourselves to getting back on track, to start producing some tangible recommendations to the government. Because I'll tell you, this particular issue, we've studied at length. The minister has been here a couple of times on this issue, and I think extending this, making this into a much bigger thing, is something that I warned right from the very beginning, and I will continue to say how unfortunate that is, given how much is in front of us and how much we still have yet to do. And we're all here for none of us are here forever. None of us are here forever, and we have a limited time to be able to do the work that the people of our particular constituency send us here to do. And I'll be honest with you, I will not look back on these last couple of months fondly. I won't look back on these last couple of months as parts of my career that we will, it won't make it into my memoirs. Let's just put it that way. That was funny. I'll give you that. I'll give you that, Mr. Tomlin. I'll give you that, Mr. Tomlin. But I'll give Fraser a minute to recover from that one. But it's true, and I hope none of us think that way. I hope none of us look at this as something that we should be proud of. I think that we've got to get back on track, and I think that it is an unfortunate reality that the opposition want to make this into something it's not. We need to refocus, and again, I gave Mr. Tomlin some time to recover, but I am still getting heckled a little bit here. So I think it's important that. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. That's how it was intended. Excuse me, Mr. Chair. But I think it's incredibly imperative that we move off of this. That regardless of what occurs with these motions and amendments, that we do not prioritize this. This should not be the priority of our government. This should not be the priority of the opposition. I know I know how this started. I was here. We said this was, potentially a slippery slope. But I think it's incredibly important that folks we have a little bit of time left today, and we're going to be off for 2 more weeks. And I really call on all members to reflect and speak to veterans and ask them what is the priority for them. Because that's what we've been doing on this side of the House. And I'll tell you, it's not this. It's not this, Mr. Chair. And I will just conclude by saying that, by thanking veterans again for their patience on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brian May. And on the list, I have Mr. Casey. I have also Ms. Blaney. And to close, maybe with Ms. Hefner. So, Mr. Casey, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. But first of all, I want to thank Ms. Blaney for her support of Mr. Sarai's sub-amendment. I think we've essentially come almost back to where we started in terms of having a letter and a witness potentially, if the letter doesn't provide a satisfactory result. There's a couple of major benefits of this approach, and is why I'm speaking in favor of the adoption of the amended and sub-amended the sub-amended amendment. One is that it puts a whole lot less pressure on the letter because we have a fallback. So while I went through some length as to what we would want to see in a letter that might be put forward to supplant a witness, now I don't think we need to be as prescriptive because we do have the built-in safety valve of inviting the author of the letter to come here. I also would like to address one of Mr. Richards' comments where he stated his rationale for opposing this amendment. and that is that the Conservatives won't be agreeing to any further witnesses until we have heard from the ministers directly involved. And that, for me, I think perhaps presents an excellent opportunity for the committee to break through this impasse. If the primary preoccupation of the Conservatives is to bring the relevant ministers before the committee, I don't think there's any disagreement on that. The disagreement is on the fishing expedition that follows. In terms of the viva voce testimony of the relevant ministers, if that is the focus, I think that that there is a path to resolution here, and I'd be most interested in exploring that. I'm not sure that an in-session public meeting is the place to explore it, unless others feel differently. But I would be quite happy to hear from my Conservative friends as to whether a piecemeal approach, one where we go forward with what we can agree upon and agree to park what we can't agree upon to argue about later, if necessary. It's basically the same approach that we took with this amendment that we could take with the overall motion. So I offer that as an olive branch. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Casey. Ms. Blenny, it's your turn now.
Oh, thank you, Chair, and thank you for your patience through all of this. There was a lot of votes, and my knee hurts. I was getting a little bit sore walking back and forth to vote, but there you are. That's pretty fun. So I guess for me, I'm actually taking this as an opportunity to read again the report about women veterans. And, I was recently recognized by women in the defense world because of this work, but it's not public yet, and that worries me greatly. I also am finding it hard to listen to the back and forth between the Conservatives and the Liberals about who was worse in the role that they played with veterans. And, I don't know that that's why we're here. So I just want to be clear. I need to get this report done. We have a commitment to women to get this done. This matters more to me than anything else I've ever done in this committee. It means that much to me. So if we cannot get this resolved, I'm going to encourage people to use other ways to get the answers that they need, and I will be looking towards supporting an adjournment. Because if this is all this is going to be is a back and forth about this monument and we're not going to get where we need to get, I cannot sacrifice the work that we did for women veterans on that. So I just want to be really clear with the committee that this is the direction I'm starting to go in. And I'm hoping that we can get somewhere. And I will repeat this again. We saw in the testimony on this monument that even though we keep hearing the Liberals say that it was veterans who responded, we have no clear way of knowing that that happened. And that does bother me. I trust veterans. I believe if veterans know that they're being asked questions, they are going to step up and they are going to answer. But there's a confusing lack of communication for me, because I also have heard very clearly, and I think everyone in this committee has heard it, that veterans often feel that they are not connected to these systems. When we were talking about the transfer of the services for veterans to support them with rehabilitation being moved to private sector, we heard very clearly that a lot of them had no idea this process was going to happen. And we heard the ministry say, yes, we sent out information. And, one of the things that I proposed is a letter should be sent or something more physical. We are not doing our job in this country for veterans around connecting with them. So I don't buy what I'm hearing on the Liberal side. And I don't even know that there is a big drama that was hidden behind this. I don't know what's behind it. But at this point, I'm having to make a difficult decision, and I'm going to choose the women. I'm going to choose them every single time. So I just want the committee to know that I hope we can get this figured out. And if we cannot get this figured out, then I'm willing to adjourn to get this work done. But I also want the committee to know I'm willing to come back, but I am going to prioritize the women. And I think that this is an impossible decision, and it's not right that I have to make it. But like I said earlier, I will choose the women every single time. They've been made invisible, and I will not continue to support that.
Thank you, Ms. Blaney. And we all know how important that study is for all members here. We were so happy to do that study, and there was collegiality between us to have that study. And as you know, we have a lot of recommendations, and those recommendations, we hope that they can be implemented for women. And the analyst told me that I said that it's going to take 3 meetings, but the analyst told me that we will have more than 4 meetings to finish that study on women. So before I go to Mr. Desilets, il y a Madame Hefner qui souhaitait intervenir. Miss Hefner.
Thank you, Chair. I want to say how much I appreciate the intervention from Ms. Blaney. And I wasn't here for the testimony of either of those studies, but I think I would really like to get to the women's study as well. And I really appreciated the comments from my colleague, Mr. May. I think it's clear from the interventions that we've heard just today and by the behavior of the Conservatives that they don't want to accomplish anything at this committee. They're just trying to obstruct us. And I think Mr. May also made a very good point about the nature of this debate. And so I would like to move that we move this discussion in camera.
Right away. Écoutez, membres du comité.
Committee members, I have a request to move into an in-camera meeting.
Je vais donc demander au...
So I will ask the clerk to take the vote on passing into an in-camera meeting.
Chair, what did you just?
In camera. That's where we're going to vote on a motion to move in camera.
Who moved that?
Ms. Hefner.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just have a question. So right now, go into camera?
No. We're going to vote.
Right.
We're going to vote to go in camera or not.
Okay, but my understanding on this committee in the past is that we couldn't make that kind of a flip switch because it takes work to do, so that we could not move from camera into the other or the other way. Yeah. At this committee, there was no...
Why would you want to go in camera?
You cannot do that.
Yeah, what happened to transparency and veterans?
I understand, but like I was told, we have that motion on the table. We can't discuss it. We have to go right away to vote. Yeah.
I'm discussing procedure in this committee where
Yeah.
we've been told
Dilatory.
in the past when we wanted to do that.
Yeah, but like I
That
said,
is not
there
an
is a
option.
mandatory motions, so we have to go right away to vote, and we will come back if it's possible.
Okay, fine.
So, Mr. Clerk,
Mr. Casey?
In favor?
Ms. Hefner?
In favor.
Mr. May?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
In favor.
Mr. Sarai?
Yes.
Mr. Dodo?
Opposed.
Mr. Richards?
Opposed.
Mr. Tolney?
Opposed.
Ms. Wagenton?
Opposed?
Monsieur Desilets? Ms. Blaine?
Against.
Yeas 5, nays 6.
alors la demande de passer en...
So So the request to move in camera is not accepted, is rejected. I have Mr. Desilets and then Mr. Richards. Mr. Desilets. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that Ms. Blaney shouldn't have to decide between veterans or and what we're looking at now. I think veterans want us to deal with this matter. Now, they've been used so much during this process, and it's the first time that a Liberal at this table has admitted that something has broken in this process, if I've properly understood what you said. There have been real things that just haven't gone properly. You want a clear process. I don't know if it was you, sir, who said you wanted a clear process, but the process was clear, but it wasn't respected. So I'm looking at Ms. Blaney. For me, this is an issue of honor, of values, and of respect for the democratic process. And I can't believe, I need some violence here, but I can't believe that you agree to this. The Prime Minister's office said, no, it won't be that one, it'll be this one. I was glad to hear you talk about engineering, architecture, design management. Now, there are people who deal with these things. Now, the NCC, and I'm sure you have people who have dealt with them. I've looked into things. You know that the power of the NCC is really minimum. It just implements things. Excuse me, Mr. Desilets. Mr. Desilets, excuse me. Beg your pardon, Mr. Desilets. I will give you back the floor, but as I said at the very beginning, it is now 7:50. Mr. Desilets, we are. Let's resume the. Mr. Desilets, you have the floor, and I will give you back the floor. But since it is 7:50 p.m., I would like to know from the members of the committee: do they wish to adjourn this meeting?
Non. Écoutez,
we have our resources until 8:30. So, would members of the committee like to adjourn? I've been told no. Should there be a vote? So we will continue because I don't have consent of committee members. So, Mr. Desilets, you have the floor. And I think, yes, please thank the page who brought you a glass of water. Yes. So we're going to 8:30, is that correct? Okay, fine. I'll finish what I have to say, Mr. Chairman, or rather I have finished what I wanted to say. Mr. Desilets has finished speaking, and the next on the list is Mr. Blake Richards.
Mr. Blake Richards, the floor is yours, so please, Mr. Richards.
So, I can see we're at a situation here, obviously, where there is a bit of an impasse, and it comes down to this: we're firmly of the belief that the government needs to be accountable for whatever happened in the period of time between November 8th of 2021 and I forget the exact date in June of 2023 when the monument was announced, with the changes that were insisted upon by the Prime Minister's office. And obviously, that delayed this monument from being built. beyond all the delays that were already there prior to that. And I understand, I can see there's no doubt that the Liberal Party wants to avoid documents from the Prime Minister's office being released. We won't accept that. That's not acceptable. I mean, the Prime Minister's office should be accountable and transparent, and we believe that firmly. There's no way we'll back down from that. And it seems as though we have a pretty clear indication that the Liberals will go to quite great lengths here to avoid that happening. That's clear. We're seeing a filibuster. We're seeing amendments. We're seeing things to try to muddy the waters. We're seeing arguments to try to distract from the issue at hand. And I certainly agree with what I heard from Ms. Blaney, that there are things that I think need to be dealt with. And I had really hoped that perhaps dedicating a couple of meetings, I think many of us had hoped that dedicating a couple of meetings would, at the very least, maybe break down the resolve of the Liberal members, or maybe they would decide that enough was enough. They would just let us have the documents that are needed to be able to find out what actually did transpire here. But it doesn't seem as though that's the case. And you know, this has been drug on for months now. We're certainly not prepared to back down, but I certainly do understand the sentiment. I mean, we had a very groundbreaking and quite a study that involved a lot of this committee's time, and it would be a shame to see that not result in a report. I share that concern with Ms. Blaney. I also share the concern about the witnesses who've had to been postponed twice now, and I know that they're I've heard from one or two of them wanting to kind of want some sense of when this will happen, and we can't give them that because we don't know how long the Liberals want to continue to filibuster this situation. So maybe there's a way we can make sure those things that need to be dealt with, that Ms. Blaney has indicated, get dealt with here, and yet still return to this. And so after consulting with our clerks here to get some sense of what was possible to make this happen, I would like to move the following: that the debate on this motion be adjourned until we have completed the review of the study of the report on the women's study, and that we've had the one meeting with the witnesses that has had to be postponed, and that the committee agrees that we would then immediately return to debate on this motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blake Richards. And I'd like to know if someone would like to, Mr. Sean Casey.
In all of my time in this committee, that is the most sensible, best intervention I have ever heard from Mr. Richards, and I'm fully in support.
Okay. Well, so I have that motion on the table. So I'd like to I'd like to ask members of the committee, do I have unanimous consent on the motion of Mr. Blake Richards? Do we have unanimous consent? Great. Adopté. Yes.
Carried.
Mr. May.
I'd ask to adjourn tonight, the meeting today. I need more material for my memoirs.
Yeah, your memoirs. I love that.
Can I get in the B-roll there?
I have to point out that was my first intervention of the evening.
I know.
I'll just say that was pretty successful.
Well,
It is what it is.
do I have to ask the clerk? It seems that we have unanimous consent to adjourn the meeting. So thank you to our translators, technicians, and clerk and analysts. Meeting adjourned.